Stranger Things slowly builds up one of the most complex dimensional systems in modern TV, and it does it without ever stopping to fully explain what's going on. On the surface, it's just a story about kids on bikes, but before you know it, worlds overlap and realities echo into each other. Some places are physical, some are mental, and some exist in spaces where time doesn't even behave normally. But before we get into the darker, stranger dimensions, we need to start where the show starts. Somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. We need to start in Hawkins. Earth. Hawkins, the right side up. Alright, now I know the right side up is basically a play on words referring to Earth itself, but since we spend most of our time exploring Hawkins, let's just talk about that, alright? Stranger Things, it begins in what looks like a familiar version of our own world, small-town America in the early 1980s. Hawkins, Indiana is quiet, isolated, and mostly forgettable on the surface, as is real-world Indiana. You've got bike rides after school though, local diners, and a community where everyone seems to know everybody else. Not bad. It's the kind of town where nothing major is supposed to happen, which is exactly why it works so well as the foundation of the story. And almost immediately, the show makes it clear that Hawkins isn't just any town. Sitting just outside its limits is Hawkins National Laboratory, a government facility officially focused on energy research, but secretly running classified experiments involving psychic abilities and parallel dimensions. That alone tells us that things in Hawkins aren't going to stay boring for very long. Now, what really defines this version of Earth is how vulnerable it is. Everything works the way it's supposed to. Time moves forward normally and people age, bleed, and die like they always have. There's nothing mystical or special about Hawkins itself. No ancient prophecy tied to the town, no hidden destiny that makes it important. The town becomes important simply because it's where the barrier between worlds was first broken. And once that happens, Hawkins turns into a battleground, constantly affected by forces it doesn't understand and can't control. So Hawkins, or the right side up as Mike later calls it in season 5,
the burn starts and there's sufficient cover, we'll signal Hopper, who will make his move. You and Harrington follow along in the right side up. Just remember.
Isn't just home base, it's the control sample. Everything unnatural in Stranger Things only stands out because this world feels so real, so grounded, and so dangerously unprepared for what's bleeding into it. The Upside Down. Alright kids, so the first time we encounter the Upside Down, it isn't explained at all. It's presented as something unknown, hostile, and deeply wrong, and that uncertainty is deliberate. When Will Byers disappears in 1983, the show doesn't tell us he's crossed into another dimension. All we see are flickering lights, strange sounds, and a shadow moving through the woods. The Upside Down enters the story as a mystery before it becomes a place. Visually, it looks like a dark reflection of Hawkins, frozen in time at the moment the first gate was opened. The buildings are the same, the streets line up, and the layout matches the town perfectly, but everything is decayed and overgrown. Vines crawl across walls, strange membranes coat surfaces, and spores drift through the air like ash. It feels like a ruined version of Hawkins and more like an echo of it, wrapped by something alien. And what makes the Upside Down especially unsettling is that many of the basic rules of reality, they still apply here. Gravity works normally, sound carries, light behaves the way you'd expect it to, humans can even breathe the air, at least for a limited time.
Dustin!
Steve!
Nancy! Ollie!
Jonathan!
That familiarity is what allows people to survive there, but it's also what makes the place feel so terrifying. This isn't a fantasy realm with entirely new rules, it's close enough to home to be dangerous. For a long time, both the characters and the audience assume the Upside Down is a separate parallel world, a dark dimension that exists alongside our own. And that assumption, it makes sense. It looks like Hawkins, it mirrors Hawkins, and it reacts directly to what happens in Hawkins. Gates open, creatures cross over, and the two spaces start influencing each other in increasingly destructive ways. But as the series progresses, especially in later seasons, that understanding, it starts to crack. You see, let's clear it up here. The Upside Down isn't acting like an independent world. It doesn't have its own history beyond the moment of its creation. Everything inside it appears locked to 1983, frozen at the instant 11 made contact with the Demogorgon and tore open the first rift. Now, 11 at the time was still just a kid being actively manipulated by Dr. Brenner, the director of operations at Hawkins' lab, and had no idea what she was doing, but that detail, it becomes crucial later, y'all, because it suggests the Upside Down wasn't always there. Instead, what the show slowly reveals is that the Upside Down functions more like a bridge than a destination, and things do get a little confusing here, but bear with me. The Upside Down is in fact like a tunnel carved out by psychic energy, connecting Hawkins to something much older and much more hostile. The Upside Down, it exists because of the gate, not the other way around. It's the space in between, shaped by Hawkins on one side and something else entirely on the other.
It's actually a bridge.
So that's why it mirrors Hawkins so closely, yet feels incomplete. Does that make sense? It's not a true world with its own identity. It's a reflection suspended between realities, absorbing influence from both directions. And as long as that bridge remains open, Hawkins will never truly be separate from what lies beyond it. The Upside Down may be the first dimension we explore in Stranger Things, but it isn't the source of the danger. It's the corridor, and everything that follows only makes sense once we understand that. The hellscape. Now, y'all, this is where things really get off the rails, okay? And I really want to clear this up here because this is one of the most misunderstood spaces in the entire show. I'm going to clear it up for you. The hellscape is not its own world, and it's not Dimension X. It's something far stranger than that. The hellscape exists between dimensions, an unstable interdimensional space that isn't meant to be occupied, explored, or survived. It looks nothing like Hawkins or the Upside Down. Instead, what we see is a vast, hostile space made up of two massive parallel planes of dark clouds and jagged floating terrain facing each other across an endless void. It's like going to Burger King in the ghetto. But between them, lightning is constantly striking, lashing back and forth, violently connecting the two sides. There's no ground, no sky, no sense of orientation, just endless freefall. And this is where Henry Creel ends up in 1979. After 11 overpowers Henry in the Rainbow Room, pinning him against the wall and beginning to disintegrate his body, something unexpected happens. A gate opens not into another world, but into this interdimensional space, and Henry is pulled through before the opening seals itself shut. For an unknown amount of time, Henry is trapped between these two planes, being struck over and over again by the lightning leaping across them. Each strike mutilates his body further, breaking him down and reshaping him. This is where his transformation truly begins. Not because of the Upside Down, not because of some monster, but because of the hellscape itself is actively destroying what's left of his humanity. This matters later because it reframes Henry's evolution. He doesn't turn into Vecna overnight. He's forged here, stripped down, burned, and altered by a space that exists purely as a chaotic pathway between dimensions. Eventually, Henry finds his way out of the hellscape, or the place simply decides it's done with him. We're not really sure which, but what matters is that he's thrown into another dimension entirely. And that dimension, the one he finally lands in, is Dimension X, or the Abyss. Season 1. Eleven's story starts with her smashing out of Hawkins' lab, and in the show, the response is almost casual. A few agents roam around with flashlights like they're looking for a lost dog. But at this point, Eleven isn't just a runaway kid. To the military, she's a walking nuclear weapon that can do the unimaginable. If she gets snatched by the Soviets or decides to have a bad day in downtown Indianapolis, it's a national security nightmare. In a realistic scenario, the moment that the cell door is found empty, Hawkins gets locked down. Every road out of town, every bus, every station, every train platform gets shut down within an hour. The local police forces get told that it's a fugitive situation, and suddenly there are agents everywhere who don't ask questions. They're setting up checkpoints and running facial recognition on every security camera in town. Elle might slip through initially because, come on, nobody expects a bald kid in a hospital gown to just vanish into the woods, so she gets maybe 6 hours before the net tightens. That's her window. So she stumbles into Benny's Burgers because she's starving and hungry and has no idea how the world works. Benny, he's a good guy. He feeds her, he tries to help her, he calls social services. In the show, the lab sends one fake social worker to kill Benny and grab Elle. It's quiet and clean, but it goes horribly wrong when she escapes. But in reality, the second Benny makes that call, alarm bells are going off everywhere. The government's been monitoring every police scanner, every hospital, every social service hotline in a 50-mile radius. A call about a mysterious bald kiddo with no idea in a hospital gown? Yeah, that's her. They finally tracked her down. And now a full tactical unit is on its way. And I mean, guys, we're talking about unmarked SUVs, which form a perimeter around the diner within minutes. A Predator drone, which is the same kind they use to track down terrorists in war zones, gets repositioned overhead. Thermal imaging kicks in, the building layout has been made, and every exit is marked. Snipers have their guns pointed at the diner, and officers are in full body armor carrying taser nets and flashbangs. By the time Elle realizes something's wrong, the diner is already surrounded. Every window has eyes on it, and teams are waiting outside every door. So, Military 1, 11-0. Yeah, guys, I don't even think she's gonna get a single win in the real world, but you know what? Let's just say that she flips a car and runs. Okay, cool. But she's also bleeding out of her nose and stumbling through the woods while a helicopter with thermal cameras tracks her body heat from 2 miles away. Ground teams are already moving to cut her off based on where she's headed. She's not escaping that easily. But let's say she somehow makes it to Mike's basement, okay? The group thinks they're helping her, but in reality, they just handed her over to the military. Every time they hit the talk button on those walkie-talkies, they're broadcasting on a frequency. The military has signals intelligence units whose entire job is detecting and tracking radio transmissions. So within minutes, they pull up to the address, check the satellite imagery to build an entry plan. Mike's mom opens the door, expecting maybe a neighbor. Instead, it's federal agents FBI open up with a warrant signed by a judge who didn't ask questions. They clear the house room by room in under 90 seconds. The kids are separated, and by the end of the night, Eleven's in the back of an unmarked van heading to a facility from which she may never return. Military 2, 11-0. Seriously, the second she stepped into a house with a registered address and landline, it was over. She was finished. But let's keep things going. Let's keep it entertaining. Let's give 11 another chance here. Even after she leaves Mike's basement, the show acts like she can just walk around town. She's hitting up Will's house, raiding grocery stores for Eggos like the military isn't after her. The kids throw Nancy's pink dress and a blonde wig on her, and somehow it works. In a non-fictional world, after everything at the lab and a dead body at Benny's, Eleven's face is getting distributed to every cop in the state. The civilians are getting flyers with Elle's face that says, "Do not approach, call immediately." And so, Military 3, 11-0. One phone call, guys. That's all it takes. Special teams then get dispatched and it's game over for 11. Okay, so now let's finally talk about the scene that everyone remembers, the iconic van flip. 11 locks in, blood starts dripping, and she launches a whole utility van over the kids' heads like it's made of cardboard. The agents just stand there frozen, watching a bunch of 12-year-olds pedal away on bikes like that was literally their only vehicle. The show just implies that the US government's backup plan was, hopefully she gets tired? One flipped van, it doesn't end this. It escalates everything. The second the van goes airborne, those agents are screaming for backup on their radios. Within 2 minutes, Black Hawk helicopters are in the air. They've got thermal imaging that can detect the heat from kids' bodies through dense forests from miles away. Ground forces are mobilizing and setting up roadblocks on every route out of the area. And now, here's 11's problem. She can't fight what she can't see. A pilot sitting 2,000 feet up doesn't care that she can flip cars. His special camera's tracking everything. The kids are being lured, and before they even know, they have been pedaled into an area which is closed from all sides. And then we get to Hawkins Middle School. Here, 11 goes absolutely bonkers. She's liquefying agents' brains, disintegrating a Demogorgon in front of a gym full of kids, and then she just vanishes. Life goes back to normal after this. In real life, though, it's a mass casualty event, and that's too at a public school. Agents are lying there with their brains turned into soup, and alien biological matter is splattered everywhere. Agencies with acronyms you've never even heard of show up at Hawkins, maybe even SHIELD, I don't know, and they're investigating like their jobs depend on it. The gym becomes a biohazard site. Hazmat teams in full suits are collecting samples of what's left of the Demogorgon. Every surface gets swabbed. Every air vent gets sealed. And thanks to 11, the gym has become a potential ground zero for something that could literally rewrite biology. Everyone who was in that gym gets questioned for hours, maybe even days. Some of them might have to sign documents threatening prison time if they ever talk about what they saw. And 11, after that display of power, she's not just a runaway anymore. Every intelligence agency on the planet is moving, y'all. The CIA wants to know if other countries have people like her, and foreign governments want to know if they can get to her first. 11 will soon be found and relocated to a black site so hidden that the people guarding her don't know where they are. And now they'll try to study her. Because if the US has a psychic human weapon, one thing that they're definitely going to try to figure out is how to make more of them. It's Military 4, 11-0. tough fight, guys. Whew, it's a close one. So, we're gonna have to give the Season 1 battle to the military. And if you think it already looks bad, then let me tell you, it gets way worse in the upcoming seasons. But let's continue and you'll see why. Seasons 2 and 3. Now, there are also people like Hopper. The man literally made a deal with Dr. Brenner about trading Elle's location. Regardless of what his real intentions were, he still put 11 in real danger, and by doing so, he also secured a lifetime surveillance from the military. Congratulations. In Season 2, we see Hopper leaving food for Elle in the woods, hoping she's alive, but realistically speaking, the government wouldn't just let Hopper go about his business. They'd have agents watching his house and following him to work. They'd monitor his bank statements, his gas station stops, and literally every grocery store receipt. In a real world where a military operates in a competent way, they wouldn't have to find 11 because tracking Hopper would do the job perfectly fine. Well, turns out the people you trust are the easiest way for the government to find you. This is why I don't have any friends. Now comes the third season. A secret Russian base under a suburban mall explodes. A lot goes down, and the US government very conveniently shows up after the fact, cleans up everything, and tells the public it was a tragic mall fire. But you can't hide a fire that involves a secret underground fortress and a massive explosion. The military maintains a global network of seismic sensors specifically designed to detect underground nuclear tests and bunker busters. It's called the Air Force Technical Application Center, AFTAC, AFTAC, I don't know however you call it. So the moment that Russian machine exploded beneath Starcourt, the Pentagon sensors would have lit up like a freaking Christmas tree. The military's first guess would likely be an act of war. They would assume that a foreign power, most likely the Soviet Union at the time, has successfully invaded US soil and built a military installation. The entire town of Hawkins would be locked down, and the military convoys would start rolling in like it was the last day on Earth. The mall and everything within a mile radius becomes a restricted military zone. No one gets in or out without official clearance, a nice little badge. They'd be bringing in combat engineers to map the entire underground facility. Intelligence officers would lose their minds while figuring out how the Soviets built this thing without anyone noticing. Every single person in that building during the incident would be detained and questioned. The military would confiscate every frame of security footage from that mall. They'd have analysts going through hundreds of hours of tape, and guess what they'll find consistently in this footage? Eleven's face, because she was a regular at the mall all summer. Within a short span of time, they'd match Eleven's face against the Hawkins lab files from 1983. Soon, the authorities would build a network map of everyone she's ever been in contact with. After connecting all of those dots, they realized that she's the common thread connecting every single supernatural disaster in Hawkins. And so, the scoreboard is getting very interesting because of this. And now we have Military 5, 11, 0. We have fun here, don't we? Now, let's address the elephant in the room. 11's fake identity. The Mindscape, Mind Layer. Alright, now before we get into the Dimension X, let's take a minute to sort out the mental ones first so we don't get confused, okay? The Mindscape or the Mind Layer is another area people tend to mix up. If you do, don't feel bad about it. But the Mindscape is not a physical dimension in the way Hawkins or the Upside Down is. It doesn't exist out there in space, it exists inside of Vecna's mind. The Mindscape is a psychic domain created after 1979, shaped entirely by Henry's thoughts, memories, and rage. This is where fear has replaced physics. Reality bends to emotion, and Vecna has absolute control. And the show makes that very clear. Everything is soaked in a deep red glow with thick crimson fog hanging in the air. The sky is alive with constant thunder and lightning, making the whole place feel unstable and angry, like it's reacting to Vecna's emotional state. The ground, it isn't solid either. It's dark molten sludge broken up by strange pools of unknown liquid with black spiders crawling across the surface. Nothing here feels natural, and that's because it isn't. Scattered throughout the Mindscape are twisted organic structures and dark vines similar to the Upside Down, and that's important because this is what connects everything. The Mindscape isn't isolated. It's partially powered by the hive mind and the Mind Flare, drawing energy from the abyss itself. That's why it feels alive rather than imagined. At the center of it all floats a broken, shattered version of the Creel house. This isn't random, it's symbolic. The house represents the trauma that shaped Henry, fractured and suspended in his own mind. It's basically his trauma given a physical form. Now here's the important part. When Vecna curses his victims, he pulls their consciousness into this realm. Their bodies stay behind in the real world, but mentally, they are here. And inside the mindscape, Vecna has total control, as I mentioned. He uses memories, guilt, and fear as weapons, manipulating his victims into reliving the worst moments of their lives. And if this part felt confusing in the series, here's why. The mindscape feels real because to the people trapped inside of it, it is real. But it's not a place you can physically travel to. It's Vecna's command center, right? The psychological front line of the war. And that distinction, it matters a lot when we talk about what comes next. Camazotz. So, Camazotz is another place that exists outside the physical world, deep inside Henry's mind. But it's not the mindscape. This place isn't about power or control. It's about locking people away.
But if that's true, it would mean
I was him. I was Vecna.
Camazotz is a mental prison, built entirely from Henry Creel's memories. Not interpretations or symbolism, but actual fragments of his past stitched together into a space designed to trap and break consciousnesses. And the name, coined by Holly after she gets trapped there, is itself a clue.
Like Camazotz. What? Camazotz. From A Wrinkle in Time.
Camazotz comes from A Wrinkle in Time, where it refers to a world smothered in darkness and control. And that's exactly the role this plays in Stranger Things. It exists outside normal space and time and doesn't follow a linear timeline. Time in Camazotz, it's a mess, guys. It doesn't move forward, it just keeps jumping and looping. And now here's the important part, guys. In Camazotz, memories aren't flashbacks. No, they're like rooms. And if you pay close attention to your surroundings, you can escape from one room to another. Someone trapped here can move from one year to another as if they're walking down a hallway. One moment you're in Hawkins' lab in 1979, the next you're in Hawkins High School in 1959. None of these places are real though. They're echoes pulled directly from Henry's mind, reconstructed just well enough to feel convincing. And that's what makes Camazotz so dangerous. It feels familiar, quiet, almost empty, like a place that exists only for the person trapped inside of it. There's no wider world here, no sense of life continuing beyond what you can see. Everything exists to disorient, isolate, and wear you down. This is where Vecna hides minds that he wants to control, erase, or slowly break. Let's look at Max, for example. Camazotz becomes a maze built from Henry's past. She isn't just running through random memories, she's being dragged through the moments that shaped him, forced to relive his history on his terms. The Rainbow Room, his childhood, his anger, all of it layered on top of each other, collapsing decades into a single endless mental loop. And if this part felt confusing in the series, here's why. Camazotz looks just like another dimension, but it doesn't work the same way the others do. Let me break it down for you. If you're confused, don't judge yourself, okay? It's fine. But the Mindscape and Camazotz are both mental spaces, right? But they serve very different purposes. The Mindscape is where Vecna acts. Camazotz is where he keeps things. When Vecna wants to kill someone, he doesn't need Camazotz at all. He weakens their mind from a distance, pulls their consciousness into the Mindscape, and finishes the job there. That's what we see happening throughout the earlier seasons. The victim's body stays where it is. Their mind is what's being attacked. But Camazotz works differently. Vecna doesn't send people there just to hurt them. He sends them there when he wants to keep them. And to do that, their physical body has to be taken first. That's why later on we see Demogorgons kidnapping kids and dragging them into the abyss. Once they're physically brought into Dimension X and connected to the hive mind, Vecna can move their consciousness into Camazotz. That's when they become vessels, not victims. So think of it this way. The Mindscape is an execution room. Camazotz is a storage space, a mental prison built entirely out of Henry Creel's memories, where time jumps around and familiar places repeat over and over and over again. It's designed to trap minds, not destroy them. And that distinction, it matters, guys, because it explains Vecna's endgame. He isn't just killing randomly, he's collecting. He's choosing specific people, moving them physically, and then locking their minds inside a memory world he fully understands and controls. So once you separate those two roles, the whole system suddenly makes a lot more sense, hopefully. Now, there is one major exception to all of this, and that's Max. Max ends up in Camazotz even though her physical body never gets taken to the abyss. She's still back in Hawkins, and that feels like it breaks the rules until you look at how she got there. At the end of season 4, Vecna pretty much kills Max. Eleven barely manages to bring her body back, but her consciousness never fully returns with it. Her mind is already inside Vecna's domain, and instead of being released, it gets pushed even deeper. That's how Max ends up in Camazotz. So this is the key thing to understand. Camazotz and the Mindscape aren't separate systems. They're connected. Both of them are fragments of Henry Creel's mind. The Mindscape is the first layer, it's the entry point. When Vecna attacks someone, this is where their consciousness is pulled. Camazotz sits deeper inside, built entirely from Henry's memories, and that's where trapped minds can be hidden away. So Max doesn't walk into Camazotz physically being like, hey, what's up? She falls into it because her consciousness never leaves Vecna's mental space after her body is revived. And this realization is what eventually allows Max and Holly to escape. They figure out that if the Mindscape is how you're pulled into Henry's mind, that it can also be used as a way back out. It's not just a place of control, it's a gateway. Once they understand that Camazotz and the Mindscape are connected and that both are shaped by Henry's memories, they're able to navigate the maze instead of being trapped by it. And the Mindscape, it becomes their exit. And also an honorable mention to Kate Bush, of course, shout out. But anyway, think of it like this. The Mindscape is the door into Vecna's mind. Camazotz is the room he locks you in. It's a creepy analogy, but gosh darn does it work. I just said gosh darn. But anyway, if you can find the door that Vecna took you through again, you can leave. So with that, we've wrapped up the mental dimensions. Give yourself a pat on the back, a head pat, whatever you're into, I don't judge. And now we can finally move on to something we've mentioned several times already, the Abyss or Dimension X. The Abyss, Dimension X. So, up until Season 5, the show does a really good job of letting us believe that the Upside Down is the main threat. It looks alien, it's dangerous, monsters come from there, end of story. But by now, we know the truth. The Upside Down was never the source. It was the doorway. And the real origin point is the Abyss, also known as Dimension X. This is the first true alien world we see in Stranger Things, and it's completely different from anything connected to Hawkins. No familiar buildings, no mirrored streets, nothing created by humans. The Abyss looks broken, empty, and hostile, like a planet that was never meant for us. The landscape is barren and uneven, littered with massive rocks and covered in thick, living vines that seem to grow wherever they want. The sky is scorched and stormy, constantly churning, giving the whole place an atmosphere that feels alive, but deeply unwelcoming. This isn't a reflection of Earth, it is its own ecosystem, and it's full of life. And this is where the Demogorgons and the Demobats come from. And most importantly, this is where the Mind Flayer exists in its natural state, not as a shadow haunting Hawkins, but as a massive cloud of sentient particles that functions as the brain of the entire dimension. The Abyss is governed by a hive mind. Everything here is connected. Every creature, every vine, every movement feeds into one shared consciousness. And at that center of that is the Mind Flayer, anchoring all of it together. And so, this is where the Upside Down starts to make sense. The Upside Down, guys, it isn't a random parallel world, it's a tunnel! Say it with me! A psychic bridge carved between Hawkins and the Abyss. That's why creatures don't originate there, they pass through it. And that's why all the crawls looking for Vecna ended up leading to nothing. Vecna was never there in the first place. The Upside Down being a tunnel also explains why the Mind Flayer can influence Hawkins at all. It's how the Abyss reaches across dimensions. Now, this is where Henry Creel comes back into the picture. When Henry is expelled from the Hellscape in 1979, this is where he ends up. And unlike the Hellscape, the Abyss doesn't tear him apart, it accepts him. It says, come on in, bro. Henry sees the Abyss as a perfect world, untouched by humans, free of the chaos and hypocrisy he hated on Earth. Over time, he doesn't just live there, he integrates into it. He becomes part of the hive mind, learning how it works, how it controls, and how it spreads. He's like evil Tarzan. This is crucial because Vecna doesn't create the hive mind, he hijacks it. The Mind Flayer gives him scale, reach. It's what allows him to extend his influence across dimensions, control creatures remotely, and power both the Mindscape and Camazotz. And despite how alien the Abyss feels, there's one detail that really matters. Humans can survive there. They can breathe the air. They can exist, at least temporarily. That's why kids can be physically taken there, and that's why the hive mind can be expanded using human vessels. So whether the Abyss is another dimension entirely, or a distant planet connected by a massive interdimensional wormhole, it doesn't actually change its role in the story. We can leave that up to you. What matters in this, though, is the Abyss is the source, the Upside Down is the bridge, and everything Vecna does is built on that foundation. The right side up, Abyss reflection. Abyss reflection. So before this gets confusing, let's clear up the name first. When Mike calls Hawkins the right side up in Season 5, he's obviously just talking about the normal world. That's fine, that's canon. But for this one, we're going to slightly go into headcanon territory, and honestly, the show kind of invites it, because there's another right side up hiding in the story, one that isn't Earth at all. So think back to everything we've established so far, right? The Upside Down isn't a standalone world. It's a reflection of Hawkins, created by the wormhole linking Earth to the Abyss. It mirrors Earth because Earth is one end of that tunnel. So the question becomes, if the wormhole reflects Earth on one side, what's reflected on the other? The idea here is that the right side up is the Abyss's reflection inside that same wormhole. The opposite-facing echo, shaped the same way the Upside Down is. An easy way to picture this is to imagine a long tunnel with mirrors at both ends. One mirror reflects Earth, creating the Upside Down. The other reflects the Abyss, creating what we're calling the right side up. Same tunnel, same mechanism, different source worlds. And just like the Upside Down isn't a perfect copy of Hawkins, this reflection world wouldn't be a perfect copy of the Abyss either. It would be more ordered, more structured, a distorted echo of Dimension X filtered through the same rules that turned Hawkins into something decayed and hostile on the other end. From the perspective of the Abyss and its creatures, this reflected space might actually look strangely familiar, a version of their world that feels restrained, organized, almost artificial, in the same way the Upside Down feels like a wrong, broken version of ours. And what's interesting is that the show never outright explains this, but it also never contradicts it. And I don't know about you, but that's enough for me. Oblivion. Alright, now this is where Stranger Things stops giving us answers and starts giving us implications. Up until now, everything we've talked about exists inside the system. Earth, the Upside Down, the Abyss, the mental layers inside Henry's mind, even the wormhole itself. They're all a part of one connected structure. But in the second volume of Season 5, we're shown something that sits completely outside of that. We learn that the wormhole connecting the Earth to the Abyss isn't just floating into nothing, it's actually surrounded by a thick wall of strange, fleshy material, almost like a membrane holding the entire system together. And at the heart of Hawkins' lab, there's a massive concentration of exotic matter actively stabilizing that structure. Well, before Nancy shoots it, when the power source is disrupted, it sends out a massive shockwave. The membrane weakens, and for the first time, it tears open. What we see beyond it isn't just another dimension with rules or landmarks. There's no ground, no sky, no reflection of anything familiar. It's just darkness, endless, silent, empty. And that's where the theories begin. Because whatever that space is, it clearly isn't Earth. It clearly isn't the Abyss or anything shaped by the wormhole. It could be deep space. It could be some kind of subspace that exists alongside dimensions, or it could be something closer to oblivion, a void outside normal space and time entirely. The important thing is, this is not meant to be accessed. Every other dimension we've seen is connected by intention, psychic power, consciousness, the hive mind, the wormhole itself. This place has none of that. No life, no structure, no influence.